Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and welcome to Mondays with Mr. Happy, aka Mr. Happy Mondays, a weekly Q&A show where you ask me questions and I answer them. Getting a little bit of our mojo back this last week. It probably helps that one of my main sources of kind of just chilling out on my off time and that of Avengers. At this point, I'm waiting for the Secret Labs raid to hit, as well as the Kate and Clint content that's supposed to be coming sometime not too long after actual release. So I'm starting to get working on some of the other projects that have been on the back burner. There's actually still some game thoughts videos that I like to do. One of them on Avengers. Also a video, what Final Fantasy means to me. I feel like it's a topic when Final Fantasy 16 got announced, everyone's back and forth about, what is Final Fantasy, how people view it. And I want to post my view and a little bit of my history on the Final Fantasy franchise. Tankverse is someone was asking me about today. That is indeed in the works. We are going to try to get that out in the next 2 weeks, but I'm still kind of easing my way back into things, so I'm not going to rush anything. I'm not going to go too crazy. We're going to make sure we got our State of the Realms back on schedule. We got our weekly Q&As back on schedule, and we've got a few other fun ideas that might make for some short but sweet videos that involve things that I wish to be attempting on my live streams. Now with that, let's thank our sponsors and get to the Q&A. Thank you to our sponsors over on Patreon who have been supporting through thick and thin, through rough times and less rough times. Rough times, let's just say that. Thank you to everyone whose name is scrolling through. And of course, thank you to our patrons of Darkness, Khuja, Janova, and Kurenai Oni, who've gone above and beyond with their support. But thank you to everyone. Thank you to our patrons. Thank you to all of you for tuning in. And thanks to our question askers, which, let's find out if they're good ones this week. All right, first question of the week, hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey, Happy, hope you're well. Doing better, thank you, and I hope you're doing good as well. I have a quick question. Going into 6.0, do you want to see or think we will see more melee DPS skills like Raiden Thrust, i.e. skills that reward the players with a cool new animation, more potency for performing their other skills positionals correctly, in addition to the potency increase for hitting those positionals in the first place? I think the concept is really great. It motivates lesser skilled players to want to hit those positionals until they become automatic. Do you want to see something like Raiden Thrust for other melee jobs? I don't think we need to restrict things like that. So the idea of rewarding correct gameplay without inhibiting, I guess, incorrect gameplay. I'd say that's the biggest thing that Raiden Thrust kind of accomplishes. It manages to be a cool new skill, a cool new animation, but it fits right into the rotation you've already kind of ingrained in yourself. So if you do screw it up, you don't have to say, oh, I screwed it up, I have to start all over again, and now I'm completely off from my entire rotation, which is a potential problem when you're trying to create game mechanics that are rewarding the player for playing correctly. I think Raiden Thrust hits a pretty nice point, but I don't want to restrict it to just melees. It's an idea that can realistically work with a lot of other jobs, and I think it's a good way of, again, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I don't even have to break it down any more than you already have, because I completely agree with your statements regarding the skill. So yeah, I don't see why not. It's a really good idea, and there's no reason not to explore it. Just don't go crazy and do it for every single job, because then it starts to not feel like as good of an idea, because everyone's just got that one skill that's gone that route. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey, Haps, good day to you. Good day to you as well. Just got a quick question for now. I know you use E30 tickets from the hunt and haven't paid for a teleport in years. I was wondering how many tickets you usually stock up on, how frequently you restock, and how many you usually get before you decide you need to restock. So E30 tickets are a double-edged sword in that they're kind of annoying to use every single time. One of my biggest quality of life asks is for some sort of automatic toggle to say would you like to use an Aetheryte ticket? Little check mark. Do not ask me this again. Just like a Windows pop-up or something. But I try to keep around 500 or more. When I fall below 500, that's when you'll see me actually going out of my way to do Blue Mage weeklies or to attend more A or S ranks that are in the pre-Shadowbringer zones, because I can always use more of those teleports. But yeah, I'd say maybe once every few months. I actually don't use teleports super often, and not enough to burn through 1,000. But a stack goes up to 999, so as long as I'm between 1 and 999 and it's only taking up 1 inventory space, then that's good for me. So 500 is what I look at for my restock point. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hi, Haps. Hope you're doing great. I hope the same for you as well. Why is the dye system so bad? Man, you're asking somebody who's colorblind and doesn't glam. I cannot promise a good answer. For example, most times whenever you dye something, the entire piece of clothing becomes one color with varying shades of that one color throughout the piece. The difficulty were a system where you only get to dye certain regions. So this is actually something I can comment on. A lot of people have asked about this, because sometimes we have multiple items that are of a similar design and different parts of them can be dyed. So the question then becomes exactly as you've asked it. Why can't we just have different portions of it dyeable? Now, I'm sure there's a technical reason behind the way that items are coded and the way that they store data, and it's probably more data per item to store multiple dye states for each individual portion of the armor. It needs to be redesigned from a coding standpoint to have multiple dye spots, which All of this is technologically feasible, but the question is, how much data does it actually use? And that's always a question with Final Fantasy XIV, because, as they've stated many times in the past, it's often about how the frequency at which data is saved and the sheer amount of data that is saved is much higher in Final Fantasy XIV than most other games. They back up twice as often as other games do to make sure that you don't lose progress at all on anything that you're working on. And the number of items and the number of item systems that they have every time you transfer between a zone needs to be considered. Your die states for your items are probably among the things that are immediately loaded in, since they have to be visible. So the answer is, technologically, it's probably not the most complicated thing to achieve. It's doable in other games, and it's, if you're built for that kind of from the beginning, it's a lot more reasonable to do. Going and adjusting it after the fact is going to be a bit harder, but still completely feasible as long as they find a way to do so without causing any sort of distress to the servers regarding the sheer amount of data when 50, 100, 200 players all teleport to the same zone. My second question is, why aren't the ninja knives in Dancer Chakram separate weapons like Paladin, Sword, and Shield? There's very, very good reason for that one, fortunately, because they hate having multiple weapons to be equipped. Now, they've said if they could, they would combine the Paladin, Sword, and Shield into a single item, and then they don't have to worry about that offhand slot at all. Maybe they still keep it for crafters or gatherers, but they really hate the way that they have separate items for different jobs. It's why Thaumaturge or I guess Black Mage and White Mage don't do one-handers and shields anymore, because when it drops in a raid, it can be a pain in the ass to deal with, and just the idea of having to collect separate items altogether, it's not something they enjoy. The same goes for those weapons. They want those weapons to drop as a pair, because otherwise they have to everyone has to consider collecting two weapons, essentially. Now, of course, there is the feasibility of the second slot just being a glamour slot and only taking the stats from the main hand, but this kind of falls into line with the last question, where the data required to do something like that is probably pretty volatile, considering the way the system was already built, and it's very unlikely. The main reason, though, is because they really don't want you to have to roll on two different weapons. They do not want you to have two different weapons for any job, because it's a pain in the ass for them, and it's a pain in the ass for people who are actually collecting the weapons. Hashtag Mrhappy Mondays. Hi. Hello. I got two questions regarding streaming and copyright. Okay, I don't get these questions super often, so let's see. So I see streamers use social media logos on their stream scenes, but social media companies have some strict rules about that. Like in Twitter, you can only use their logo in blue or white while including a disclaimer, but I don't see streamers following that. Is this something streamers need to worry about? No, because quite frankly, Twitter themselves don't care. They just want people on their platform. That's like, those are like those really old things that are in their terms, like when they were first starting out, because they didn't want people using their likeness. That just never got removed, and they really don't give a shit. Also, is using G-Shade on stream a bad idea since it's a third-party program? It's something that technically is not supported by the developers, and if you were to run into any issues with it, that would be something they could not help you with, something they could not even really discuss with you at all. You could be like, hey, I use this third-party program and this and that to like a GM because you're having some sort of graphical glitch, and they'll just be like, that's against the terms of service, and you've just reported yourself for it. So see ya. Using it on stream though doesn't matter. If under your idea of it being a third-party program, so I shouldn't stream with it, ACT would have fucked people years ago. And it has occasionally, but not to the point where people don't use ACT on stream anymore. So if you can use ACT, then G-Shade or anything like that should be fine. Hashtag Mrhappy Mondays. Hey, Hap, so hope everything is going well and that you're having a good day. It's a good one. I'm a little sleepy, but that's about it. I've had like 2 nights in a row where I slept really good. But you ever have those nights where you sleep so good that you feel like shit the next day because your body's like, no, do that again. No, we can keep doing this. You don't need to wake up. That's fine. Yeah, that's how I am today. My question is about item levels and how high they might end up going. World of Warcraft is squishing their item levels for the 3rd time. They're squishing their levels also. They're straight up bringing it back down to 60 levels. After having already done it at the start of BFA, they do this because the item levels between raid tiers go up by so much more than they do in 14, which has a much more gradual increase. However, Shadowbringers, the numbers have gotten pretty high, especially on stuff like tank health. Do you think 14 will ever have an item level squish? They're already talking about doing a stat squish for 6.0. They mentioned it before 5.0 even came out. They raised the overall threshold for enemy damage, how much damage an enemy can do to you and how much damage you can actually do to an enemy. They raised the cap from 999,999 to 9,999,999 to accommodate for making sure they can design in rages that nobody could possibly survive. They subsequently mentioned during that same live letter that they were considering a stat squish in particular for 6.0, which likely wouldn't include an item level squish. They might just do both item level and stats themselves, which would make sense if you're rewriting the entire formula for it. But yeah, this is very likely we get one in 6.0. So I see you're ready to have a bear pun here. Let's see, I didn't include one because I felt like it would be pandering to the audience. I knew it because I saw the name. I was like, there's no bear pun in here. Great, thanks. We're gonna move on to the next question now. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Morning, Haps. How you doing today? I answered that in the last one, so I'll just say, I'm doing all right. You doing all right? I'm doing all right. I believe 1.0 version of 14 was developed on Crystal Tools. That is correct. And when they moved to 2.0, they switched to Luminous. They switched to like a weird quasi version of Luminous that isn't the same Luminous that they used for like 15, for example. Making the current 14 running on a stripped down version of 15. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean, you got that. Less stripped down and more optimized for the type of game that Final Fantasy 14 is, because Luminous would have been a terrible engine. If they had just run Luminous like as it was, which brings me to pose this question. Do you think the game is in need of an engine overhaul? I think the game would benefit from moving to a completely different engine. So what it would benefit from and what is a feasible thing to expect are two very different questions. I think almost any game that's been around for a long period of time, World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy 14, it doesn't matter, can always benefit from an engine overhaul or a swap to an entirely new engine. It's almost impossible to argue against that kind of idea unless you're specifically giving up certain features in order to do so. If people are into physics-based engines, for example, and you were to swap to something more like Luminous, the version of Luminous 14 runs on, there really isn't anything physics-based, you know what I mean? So, you know, some people don't want to make that compromise depending on the type of game that it is. However, with Final Fantasy 14, that's not the case. That being said, I don't think they'll do anything engine-wise for quite some time. I don't think 6.0 would be the time. I don't think 7.0 would be the time. Maybe after that, but I have a feeling we're a pretty long ways from ever seeing them actually do the game on another engine. And I bet they really want to, because of the way A Realm Reborn was built on this sort of half old 1.0 code, half different engine, you know, built from scratch. Kind of, it's full of its own technical debts, which we talk about quite frequently. But the feasibility of them doing it, I think, is a little less likely for quite some time. Probably another 3 or 4 years, to be honest. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hi, Mr. Happy. Hope you're having a great day. I hope the same for you. What modern innovations do you think Yoshida and his team that work on both 14 and 16, these are finally I mean, I knew they were going to start this week, because come on, might be able to bring back and introduce to 14? Well, 16 and 14 are two very, very different games. They're not being built on the same engine. This kind of ties into the last question. So modern innovations, I don't really think... Well, it's weird because you said 14 and 6. Oh, I guess you're just talking about those individual teams. So what you're really asking is what could they take from 16 and use that innovation in Final Fantasy 14 itself? And quite frankly, the answer is not a whole lot. They're very different types of games, and they're running on completely different engines. So just because one game has something that is technically feasible does not mean that it necessarily translates to the other game. They have different types of combat styles, which obviously is not going to be something that they adjust in Final Fantasy 14. So not really much of anything. We also know so little about Final Fantasy 16 from a technical side. We know glimpses of the story and the type of combat we'll be dealing with. We know who the producer and directors are, and we have inklings of who some of the other developers are, but we can't say anything about innovations that could be taken, because then we're projecting what we think they're going to innovate on when we haven't seen anything yet. And that leads to expectation, fruitless expectation, and that leads to disappointment. When you are just trying to create ideas of what it is they could do. So without being someone who's working on it, without seeing more of the development side and what they're actually working on outside of a 4-minute trailer, we can't really answer this. This is a question we can revisit when we see more systems in Final Fantasy 16, whether it be UI or progression. But right now, it's too early to kind of be asking that, I feel. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey, Haps, how you doing? Insert join me. How you doing? I'm doing all right. What? Sorry, I haven't seen a lot of Friends, but I've seen enough of it. I need advice on getting back into raiding. I've raided a lot in the past, but not recently. When I did, I was on PS4. Now I'm on PC, and I want to get back into it. So I could parse myself, but I can't get into a static without a parse. I can't get solid parse without a static. So this question is almost always answered the same way. We get it every few weeks, I feel like, and it is to literally just go into the party finder. You may not. Here's the thing. You may not get like oranges or purples or whatever in the party finder when you're first practicing it, but what you will be developing is a rap sheet. You'll people will see like how you're improving, how you're performing. And even in a pickup group, like you can say if somebody points out a specific parse and you know that the tank died and things got a little bit hairy there, and you had to you got a mechanic you don't normally get, and then you had to jump halfway across the map and you lost a bunch of GCDs, or maybe it was a true north party versus a relative party and you're a melee DPS or the second tank and you lost a bunch of GCDs there. There's all sorts of ways to extrapolate fights, even just based on pickup group party finder logs, that can tell a lot. And you know what, if you are performing well, you will still get purples and even potentially oranges in the party finder. Depending on your job, may be more or less likely, but still incredibly feasible. So get into the party finder, join some of the initial learning parties, get some parses from that, get some experience from that as well, and then look to statics. Because if you don't have any experience with statics, the only type of static you're going to find is one that's part of a free company that's usually more casual or just with friends that have never really tried it before or want to show you the ropes. Those would be your other stepping stones, but the party finder is most likely. Hashtag Mrhappy Mondays. Hey Haps, how is it going? It is going well. I don't know why I'm doing this. Hope you're doing good. My question is about 5.35 in the Boston Southern Front in regards to gear. If you are going in at level 80, would it be better to use level 80 gear and let item level sync work and lose your materia, or should I get item level 430 gear and meld that? First of all, the content's not going to be that serious to that degree where you need to think about it that much. And second of all, you will be getting new armor in there that will be best in slot while you're in there. So bear that in mind as well. Now, to answer your question, I'm going to answer it in a more broad sense because this applies to all level sync and item level sync content in the game. For those who don't know, when you level sync and item level sync, your materia that is equipped to your higher synced gear, let's say you have 490 gear and you're syncing to 430, all your materia is stripped away. That's what this individual is referring to when they say, let item level sync work and lose your materia. Now, if you were to wear something that was item level appropriate, you would be gaining that materia stats. Now that makes it sound automatically like using gear that is synced down is going to be better, and in some cases it is. But bear in mind that when you wear item level gear that's higher than the item level you're syncing to, it'll just sync your stats there. It'll remove the materia and it'll keep your stats synced to whatever the highest value that it can hit is. So let's say the item level 430 gear, I'm just going to throw bullshit numbers out because I don't have them in front of me. Let's say item level 430 gear, let's say your pants had like 160, for example, as the cap for substats, like determination, crit. Let's say the highest it could possibly go is 160. And you had a piece that was item level 580, and that has both stats that are over 160. When you sync down, both of those stats are going to be at 160. You won't have the materia slots, but your total substat total will be higher to make up for that. However, if you were like, let's say item level 470 and your substats were like 190 something and 140 something, that 140 something, that 20 substat gap, that won't be closed. That's just going to stay lower than the 160. I think with item level 430, without looking at the numbers and actually cross-checking my my data here, it'll probably be better to wear item level 430 stuff, like the weathered armor, I believe, is item level 430, assuming it has the substats that you actually want on it. But it shouldn't really matter that much in Bajja. Bajja is really going to be about the actions that you collect, and it's going to be about getting that Bajjan armor that makes you stronger inside of Bajja itself. Hashtag Mrhappy Mondays. Hey, Mr. Hap, sir. Mr. and sir, it's too formal. It's too formal. Hope you're doing well and feeling good. I'm doing good, and thanks for asking. I have a question concerning my friend who's recently started playing. I want to find a free company for me and my friend to join. He likes the game, but is pretty shy when it comes to making friends online since it's his first online MMO. I should have just said MMO. That's what it says, and I just added the word online. I don't know why. Should I advertise in places like Reddit, Discord, just try to interview in the game and see if something sticks? Quite frankly, for your first free company, just kind of join some random social FC and see if it sticks first, like if there's personalities that clash or anything. I wouldn't go through interviews or anything like that. He's new. He just needs to be thrown into a social free company or link shell, and that's it. I wouldn't think about it any more in depth than that, personally. Hashtag Mrhappy Mondays. Hey, Mr. Happy, if you're feeling up to it, I have 2.5 questions. Doom, 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 doom. Oh wait, no, that's like the Gur version. Boom, 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 boom. I don't remember what they're. I'm gonna stop trying to make 2.5 Men references and just move on. We are getting a deep dungeon. I really haven't done any of Eureka outside of a few trains, but I have no reference point. Do you think the Southern Front will emphasize defensive play like full deep dungeon runs do? No. Excuse me. The majority of the Boston Front is going to be about building up resources for big battles. There's supposed to be large-scale PvE battles. The only thing that I have any sort of expectation that you may want to make sure you have the correct actions for is the 1v1. Obviously, you still want the correct actions for the 24 and 48 emergency missions as well, or whatever they're called. I can't even remember. I'm just calling them by their old diadem names. But those are going to be the big things that you're going to want specific actions for. Obviously, I will say this. In Eureka, if you get hit by some AoEs, you just die outright. That'll probably happen here. But not every single one, just some of them. So I've been mulling over the idea of that the healer fantasy requires defensive play, given that many who start as healers are heal bots, and those who heal bot at higher levels seem to gain fulfillment by not letting anyone die. I think 14 can go defensive gameplay well in order to engage those players. No, Final Fantasy 14 has never fundamentally been about healers being healers, and that's it. They've always been these, everyone kind of has to contribute the maximum amount to any sort of group or any sort of raid, and if that involves not sitting around waiting for someone to take damage, then it's going to be about DPSing. The big thing is that in order to effectively accomplish what you're asking, basically all damage from every source in the game needs to be increased in frequency. Now, that doesn't sound like something that's all that bad, but it is when you have a GCD of 2.5 seconds. Now, you might be wondering, what does that have anything to do with it? Just make it so damage happens a couple of times in that 2.5 second window. What you're doing there is you're creating a very high skill ceiling that is more likely to completely push players out of the game than telling them that they need to throw a glare out there here and again will. It just creates a lot of problems. It's something that I could probably extrapolate in a longer answer, and I don't want to do something that's too long here. But the GCD and the way that the game is built from the ground up now, you'd have to basically remake the whole game down to the GCD length in order to more properly do defensive gameplay in all aspects of the game. Because you cannot just say, oh, well, in Ultimates you need to heal, or in this Savage fight you need to heal. No. Every single fight, the whole game needs to train you to be always pressing your heal buttons, to frequently be in need of pressing your heal buttons. It cannot be the occasional activity that only a small percentage of the player base sees. So no, I don't see that that's ever going to be fully realized. I will say this, I find a lot of fulfillment out of doing that with as few buttons as possible and then maximizing my DPS. I do find fulfillment out of that personally, because there is a brilliance in when you're the white mage that knows, okay, I can Medica 2 here, let everyone tick up, and then right before this next mechanic happens, I can pop my Afflatus Rapture for the movement, which will get everyone topped off for this mechanic. As opposed to somebody who goes, okay, let me cast Medica 2, Medica, oh, and let me do another Medica right here, let me regen the tank, shield the tank. I'm figuring out exactly what it is I need to get through any specific situation, and then trying to get all of my GCDs to be damaged at that point. I do find a great deal of fulfillment out of that, personally. And 2.5, if you haven't answered this yet, what were your experiences going into the deeper floors of the dungeons, if any? You mean of Deep Dungeon? I only went past 150 in Palace of the Dead once, because it's just so fucking long and boring that I got my Night Pegasus on my first trip down there, and I was like, fuck it, I'm never going back. Heaven on High, we only did to 100 once. We got to floor 99 and wiped the first time, but our second save file, we took up to 100. And I've been meaning to actually go back and try to solo to 100, but while it's not as long and boring as Palace of the Dead is, I just... the idea of just spending day after day after day doing it, I don't know, dude. Just, I can't. Those lower floors are just so fucking boring. Especially farming Empyrean shards to make sure you have enough of the sustain potions. It's just, it's fun for like 20 floors, and if you fuck up at all in those 20 floors, you have to go through hours of just boring shit to get back to that point, and that just kills it for me. Oh my god, this is a block of text. Hey there, hashtag Mrhappy Mondays. I hope you find yourself well. I am finding myself well enough. Thank you, and I hope the same for you. I'm a year-long viewer and a first-time asker, so I don't know. A bonus of a best night. Oh. See, I've gotten that 2 nights in a row now. I feel like shit, so maybe I should sleep like shit again. Firstly, I just want to preface this by saying that we don't share a lot of core values. I love Glam and Dies, but your serious love for the community really makes this a must-watch every week. Thank you. I have a serious-ish question and a possibly spoiler question. All right, let me turn this off and see, because I haven't had to move a question to the spoiler section in quite some time. So let me see if I can actually get away without doing it this time. For my first question, I'm a console player, and I just started Uwu with the new static, and I tried watching your 90-minute long video, but seeing as how I'm the only one of my static playing on console, I feel like I'm in a net loss when everyone is playing with Cactbot or the like. Yo, if you're playing with Cactbot players, get the fuck out. They're bad. I'm just going to say it outright. I hate when people use the excuse, oh, I use this. It doesn't do the mechanic for you. Listen, I have to say this tactfully. If you are using an assistance program of some kind, because it is the only way you will get to enjoy that content, then what I say seems kind of shitty. But I'm going to say this also. If we start raiding on the night, and you die to a mechanic, and your reason is, oh, my ACT trigger didn't go off. Oh, my Cactbot wasn't on. Learn the fucking fight before you turn that shit back on. That's all I gotta say. Anyway, now everything's going well, but I just feel like I'm personally having issues keeping up with my screen when I'm listening to cues and watching for mechanics and tracking status. Luckily, it's all fairly rinse and repeat. Yeah, you just gotta practice it. I mean, that's literally all it is. It's rinse and repeat. You just have to get comfortable enough with it, with enough practice. I don't use ACT triggers. I don't use Cactbot. I hate that shit, as you can tell from my previous reply. So trust me in that it just comes down to practice and understanding the encounter you're actually playing. Don't think about what you're reacting to. Think about what's going to be happening and where you're going to be moving for it based on the debuff you have. Playing your job needs to be second nature in cases like that, though, so make sure you get plenty of practice on that. For my fun spoilery question, let's see if this has to go in the spoiler section or not. If 14 and 12 take place on, let's say, one Evilly shard, and the final boss is the Warrior of Life from 1, do you think it's possible the other shards are the worlds of Final Fantasy's past games? That's been a long time theory that is in some ways supported by what we already know. Obviously, the first having the Warrior of Light and that him being their legendary hero is a big reference. But that's what it all comes down to. They're all references to... or at least the ones that we actually know of thus far are references to the relative games they come from. Even looking at the 13th being the Void, Lightning Returns spoiler, the entirety of Final Fantasy XIII's world gets basically completely erased. So to some degree, well, actually, so at the end of 2 and the beginning of 3, it's being completely consumed by darkness, and it's basically about to be completely erased and reset. So it is in some ways still a reference to the fact that Final Fantasy XIII has that sort of as its ending. Obviously, the source being the 14th shard, being Final Fantasy XIV itself. And I'm sure if we were to look at other shards and we were to learn more, we might see some overlap in themes there. But they aren't literally those worlds. They are, as I said earlier, references. All of the things in Final Fantasy are not direct. They're just references to other games. Just like every other Final Fantasy game references every other Final Fantasy game, whether it be through Ifrit, Shiva, Gilgamesh, whatever it is. That's all it is and nothing more. I almost forgot to turn on the question again. Hashtag Mrhappy Mondays. Hello. Hashtag hello. Hi. Hey. Hi. Hey. Hi. Hey. You doing all right? I'm doing all right. Long time asker, short time watcher. I have a bonus of Desynthesis Savage. I'm all about it. No, expert desynthesis. There you go. I have a few questions, but if you're short on time, I'll order them from most important to least. Am I short on time? I don't know, because I don't know how many other questions I have. We'll see. 1. What are some mechanics from other games you'd like to see from other games? A better glam system. That's it. Quite frankly, it's the only thing I can really think of. Maybe Mythic Plus. I just look at Transmog and Mythic Plus and go something like that. Yeah, I'll go something like that. 2, what do you think of the mentor roulette having extreme trials? I am amazed they do it, and I'm kind of glad they do it, because you can find a good mentor from a bad mentor based on whether or not you actually respond to extremes and whatnot actually being completed in there. I am very vocal against the mentor system, against the majority of mentors, not all of them, because there are good ones out there. But that there are just way too many players that just are in the mentor system for that extra roulette, and they are completely worthless when it comes to teaching new players anything whatsoever. That could be whether it be due to skewed views that they are not backed up by factor or information or practice, and they're just ideals that they've come to believe and they refuse to accept anything else. Or they just actually don't like helping other people and they just wanted a fancy crown. I hate it, which is why it amazes me extreme trials are in there. But you know what? When you get that one mentor roulette where you get the extreme trial and the mentor doesn't leave and he actively tries to help people improve, he or she is just... I love those mentors. Those are the mentors I like. I just hate the mentor system because it does not encourage those kind of mentors to exist. What do you think about the way mannequins are working right now? So there's been actually a lot of comments before this where apparently when you put the item on the mannequin and then you remove it, the mannequin keeps the appearance and it stops being like sold as like an item on a retainer. If you were asking that question last week, read through my comment section because I've seen a bunch of other people commenting on it, people who are way more knowledgeable about it than me. Also selling sets of stuff. They said they plan on just displaying that won't take retainer cell slots, and they still do. Yeah, it's apparently, like I said, apparently other people have come up with solutions to things like this. For which old and outdated content do you think Square Enix should rework? Guildhest? No. I do. So here's the thing. I don't think Guildhest should be reworked as Hall of the Novice too, but I think they should do a Hall of the Intermediate. That just explains like basic concepts past what Hall of the Novice actually covers. Old content that they should rework. There isn't really anything that they need to rework. They could add more things too, like they could rework when the availability of squadrons starts. They could maybe rework like old Beast Tribe quests and EXP values and their quests, perhaps to be more like newer ones. A lot of it is old systems that exist, and then we have new systems that only work in newer zones that we wish worked in older zones. Things like the Fate Gemstones for Shadowbringers materials. Those are only for Shadowbringers. You know, it'd be cool if we had Fate Gemstones for the previous zones. Beast Tribe quests, you know, scaling between a level range. You know, a Realm Reborn, I wish it would be from 40 to 50. You have that range, and it can sync with you, so you can use it like you do the other ones. Update the EXP values relative to, you know, the 40, 50, and 60, all the way up to 70 Beast Tribe quests, because the Pixies are just so much better for 70 to 80 than the other ones are for their respective ranges, which I believe is because there's only one combat Beast Tribe in Shadowbringers, but still, it doesn't feel as satisfying to do the other ones. So updating old systems that have seen updates, but the updates only exist in the newer zones. That's the big thing I'd like to see with a lot of the older systems. Well, it looks like it's a good thing I took all those extra questions, because it looks like the last few are going to be lightning rounds. I don't remember which ones I've left for the end here, but let me scroll through real quick and see what we got for a lightning round. You know, shit's about to get real when he takes off the specs. Yo, that thing last week, that upset me. There's no point in harassing people in the fucking comment section of a YouTube video, man. I just don't know how people have the time to spend on shit like that. Maybe nowadays it's a little bit more it's a little bit more time people have to spend, but my word, dude, I couldn't believe that from last week. Okay, let's see here. Colors with the gear, the Twitter logo question, item levels going up. No, I know there's one here. Come on. I remember there being questions. There's the innovations question. Thank you for last week's answer. No questions. Want to say I appreciate you. Hey, I appreciate you for asking the question in the first place. I think there's another one on advice for getting into raiding. I was right here. There's the one joining the FC. I don't even remember the review thing from last week. I'd have to rewatch that. Let's see. I don't even remember seeing this one. I must have scrolled right past it. I have a question about VPNs, Exit Lag and NordVPN. I've tossed around the idea of getting one couldn't justify the price when things work fine right now. It can only lower your latency but allow you to access things. Yeah, so VPNs, a lot more often people use things like VPNs for changing the region with which their IP address appears like it's from. So for example, you can use VPNs normally in order to make it look like you're logging in from like Europe, like one of the countries in Europe or Canada or something like that. And then that'll let you access things like geo-restricted content, like some things are only available in Netflix Canada. So I see people doing that all the time. I don't use any VPNs for gaming. If I was going to use a VPN, it literally only be for security, for example. Because, you know, obviously bouncing your IP address and making sure that companies can't get access to personal information is something that is far more valuable. I've actually turned down some VPN opportunities because if I were to be affiliated or sponsored by a VPN program, I would really want it to be one that is more, it's just a general VPN, because you can do everything a gaming VPN can do, a normal VPN can do as well. There's no difference between the two. One of them is just like pre-programmed to specifically have like routes with games that are proven to have lower MS based on location and things like that. So they're good. I'd recommend VPNs, but I do a good amount of research before just buying into the first gaming VPN that you see, because there are a lot of VPNs out there and people have some vastly different experiences with them based on the region of the world they live in, even if it's somewhere like West Coast United States versus East Coast United States. So that would be a big one that I would check. But yeah, I can recommend that at least the use of VPNs can absolutely improve your experience in Final Fantasy XIV, other games, as well as the whole geo-restricted content thing. I'm not affiliated with any. I'm not sponsored by any. I have a funny story regarding one from recent times that if you follow me on Twitch or Twitter, you'll know that I had that story to tell. But yeah, that's the best answer I can possibly do with that one. Are you progging with Tate again next year? I hope so. Tate was great to prog with. He really brings this amazing energy to prog where So I've been in a lot of mixed types of prog groups, whether it be filling for a group that has a full roster, but somebody can't actually raid on the day that like the new patch comes out. So I just fill for them for a few days, but they still want to keep their core roster. I've done, beginning to end prog. I've done beginning to like halfway through because it's just not the right environment for me. I've been through all sorts of things. And the group that I raided with Tate was one that was going like really hardcore hours, but it wasn't like trying to be like a world first prog group or anything, and that's kind of like the perfect space for me. But Tate makes, a 10, 12, 14-hour day. He really brings this energy about it, even when he's like kind of spent and just needs a break. He brings just the best out of people's attitude, I feel. And that's incredibly valuable. That's something that is almost unmeasurable when it comes to raid progression. So if I have the opportunity to raid with Tate again, I would take it, because he's an absolute pleasure when it comes to raiding. Even if half the time he's like, guys, I don't know how to play this job. I just picked it up for this. I don't know what I'm doing. I'll make sure I get it. Which he was always doing. He's always like, dude, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing on Monk. And we're like, you're doing fine. Just stop it. You're doing good, Tate. Just come on. You're all right. You're all right. But yeah, I would definitely raid with him. I hope that ends up being the case. Whether it be next patch or any patch after that, I hope I have the opportunity to do that again. It's some kind of lore-based questions that it seems like some of the replies actually took care of. So I don't really need to get into those too much. There's another one that's about the mannequins. Again, somebody else brought up the mannequins, but with the hashtag this time. I took a break after I finished E8, but looking to start some new characters with friends and get them into it to try and get some practice in lower level trials and dungeons. Any recommendations for refreshers, or have at it semi-blind again? I mean, just watch some of the guides if you ever want refreshers. Like, if that's all you're looking for is a refresher, then a quick glimpse at a guide. Half the time you'll watch a minute of it and you'll be like, I remember this whole thing all of a sudden. It all comes back like a PTSD trip whenever you've actually progged through a great deal of things. So I think you'll be okay. I think if you're really concerned, I'd say semi-blind is probably okay. But if you just go and watch any guide for like a minute or two, it'll probably all come back to you. Let's see. When do you start making versus videos again? Yeah, no, we just talked about that here. I know you have caster. Which ones did I even release for Shadowbringers? That is a great question. I know I did ranged. I know I did caster. I know I did ranged. Let me see. Did I do any other one? Well, I did thoughts on ranged. Maybe, did I not do... Here, let me just type versus. Final phase, there's healers, ranged physical. Did I not call the caster one? Did I call it like VS versus caster? Caster versus black mage? So I've done white mage and ranged physical and casters. I think I just have tanks and melees left. Yeah. I do a black mage versus summoner versus red mage, Shadowbringers edition. Why did I not just call it versus? I just realized that I didn't call it the versus here. I guess I kind of did the same thing for 4.2. But yeah, we've done 3 of the 5 verses. We just have to do tanks and melees now. And we'll be all set for Shadowbringers. And with Warriors' recent adjustments, that'll probably be good. 5.4, we're going to see Monk changes, so we might want to hold off on that until then. But we'll see. So that's the answer for that. There's an opinion piece on Blue Mage that's in here about someone not liking it being limited. Valid opinion to have. I quite enjoy its current state. It's just I wish there was more to do with it. I wish Palace of the Dead had a Blue Mage version where you start on the first floor and you only have water cannon, and you actually have to learn the spells as you go throughout Palace of the Dead instead of just leveling up. I think that would be cooler for Blue Mage than just being able to do Palace of the Dead, for example. Do you think New Game Plus will ever have 1.0? Probably not. 1.0's cut. They basically have to completely re-render a lot of 1.0's cutscenes in 2.0, and that's not like a crazy difficult thing. There are not a lot of 1.0 cutscenes, believe it or not. But I don't think they will. I think enough of that exists on the internet, and there'd be no way to really play through it that you'd just be experiencing cutscenes. So it'd more likely just be in the book in your in-room, and less so New Game Plus playable experience. I don't think they'll ever do that. Let's see. I know you said you played WoW. What about 14 do you like more? Most everything. A lot of it is brand loyalty, aka fanboying. But World of Warcraft really lost me in Cataclysm. Even during like Burning Crusade and Wrath, I found myself being on and off because something about WoW just wasn't. I didn't really ever feel like logging in. Like with Final Fantasy 14, I sometimes reach a point where I go, okay, I don't really have much of a reason to log in right now, so I'm going to go play something else. With World of Warcraft, when I stopped feeling like logging in, it was like immediate and like and never returned. And then eventually I'd like talk to a friend at some point down the line. He'd be like, oh, the new expansion is coming out. The new patch is coming out. You should try it. And then I'd like hop back on. But Cataclysm just burned me, man. It just wasn't fun. And I just never gave the game a chance again. I think I tried playing Legion like in the beta for like 2 hours. And I was like, I don't want to fucking do this. This shit's so boring. Whereas Final Fantasy 14, I find a lot more gratification out of my time being spent on there and the amount that it actually respects my time. Nowadays, with the way that the loot works and the way that optimizing like best in slot works, I really don't care now. The only thing that I might do is the Burning Crusade Classic when that comes around, because I don't really care for level 60 Classic, but Burning Crusade Classic, listen, you haven't played World of Warcraft unless you've gone through Hellfire. You've been in Hellfire Peninsula, and you're randomly just doing a quest, and you try to grab one of those objectives for the daily quests on the map, and somebody just swoops down and kicks your ass. And then when you're the person who swoops down and does the ass kicking, and then finally 2 people try to do it, and it actually becomes somewhat of a battle. Those are good times, and I remember having a really good time with Burning Crusade. So I'll probably do that briefly, at the very least. Also a question, when a boss jumps in as untargetable, do dots still tick? So in really old A Realm Reborn, and I even think some early Heavensward content, the answer is yes, but they very much moved away from that, and it no longer is the case for pretty much any encounter nowadays. But if the old content, yes, but only some of the old content, not all of it. I think that might have been the last one. More stuff about mannequins. Gotta fix your mic. The mic should be fine. I'm not even using RTX voice. I haven't used RTX voice in some time. I just like to speak from far away in the microphone, and I'm from New Jersey, so we go constantly with every word that comes out of our mouths. But that looks to be all of the questions, unless I somehow scrolled past one. So with that note, thank you for watching this week's episode of Mondays with Mr. Happy. Be sure to ask your questions in the comment section of the video below. Thank you again to our patrons of Darkness, Khuja, Janova, Kurenai Oni, and all the rest of you who are supporting over on there. Thank you so much. And hopefully you also enjoyed the bonus podcast this week with TBG. We released it yesterday from when you guys are seeing this. So if you haven't watched it, we talk about the PlayStation 5 showcase and, of course, Final Fantasy 16, which I'm sure will be a frequent topic here on the channel whenever we get the opportunity to talk about news for it. But thank you for watching. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share. I'll see you all in the next video. Until then, take care.